right, Cole, we're talking about what I think is a pretty cool topic and something that we look at in our business based around fundraising and making sure you have the capital you need for your business, but really new and innovative ways that we're seeing new and upstart companies getting funding. One thing people don't really think about, and what we're seeing is kind of, I would even call it a tidal wave of new investment, is receiving investment from public companies that have started either they're directly owned outside the business venture capital arm, or directly investing in startup companies that can fill an industry need or add to their supply chain, making those investments directly in these new companies. I think when most people think about startup funding for their business, they're thinking about friends and family loans, going to the bank. Potentially, if they're a Silicon Valley company, they're looking at the venture firms there and doing these kind of things. But the idea of talking to somebody like a Nestle or Kellogg's or Starbucks, or even some crazy names like we're seeing 7-Eleven, these companies that have their own venture capital arms, not an idea that immediately strikes company founders, new business owners as potential sources of capital for their businesses. What are you seeing, and what do you kind of make of this trend?
Sure. You know, it's always existed in the market, in private markets, that, you know, public market participants like corporates come in and participate in early stage companies, yeah. But usually it's 100% buyout, right? It's 100%, I like this asset, you know, the underlying management team, I'm going to buy it, I'm either going to fire the whole management team and everyone works for us now, or you're going to integrate them in and there's going to be some kind of synergy, and it's just a corporate acquisition approach. What we're seeing now is a lot of big corporates creating their own VC arms, and what's really changing is they're taking minority positions in portfolio companies. And that's the thing that's kind of exciting, and a lot of market participants don't take into account, is it's not just venture capital funds, angel investors, friends and family, bank loans, it's also corporates, right? So these corporates need to someday acquire portions of their business to make them going concern entities. They need to grow and they need to sophisticate. A lot of these corporates don't invest purely in R&D. You know, I would look at early stage investing largely for corporates as that's your research and development arm. And so what you're seeing these corporates do is take minority positions, and that's it can be as early as seed run funds or funding rounds, but also into A rounds, B rounds. And you know, they want to see these companies grow and succeed and potentially be 100% acquisition target in the future, or worst case scenario, the company grows and they make a boatload of money for their investors. Right. I mean, these companies, US corporates, are sitting on such huge cash balances that they need to use it appropriately. And their public shareholders are saying, hey, why is cash balance so high? Why aren't you deploying? Why aren't you making corporate acquisitions? And this venture arm is something exciting that we're seeing for not only just retail investors in the market, but institutions are probably demanding it. They're asking these guys to say, what's the future of the business? How are you investing in the future?
It's happening at scale too. In preparation for the chat today, I was reading a Barron's article from 2019, 3,264 investments from pubcos into, call it venture capital, startup type financing. So these companies are taking it seriously, they're dedicating time, they're dedicating resources, they're dedicating people to it, and it's probably going to become more prevalent than we've seen before as we see issues with supply chains, global conflicts, moving and shifting economies and demands, shortages of products. People are going to have to start thinking more and more about having their own consistent supply chain, having an R&D function that's external, that's not requiring a huge investment from them, but that can build onto their business, things they can tack on in the future. I don't see it really going anywhere.
No, I agree with you. And I think you're going to see more corporates do it. And most people don't recognize the quantity of corporates that are already doing this because it's not in the newspaper every day. No. You don't see, you know, the VC arm of Kellogg's coming in and saying, hey, we participated in this early funding round. Sometimes they're the only bidder on these funding rounds. It's an exclusive deal. But you're seeing companies that, our average viewer and listener wouldn't even know existed. Guys like 7-Eleven, guys like Toyota, General Mills, Starbucks in 2019 funded their own $100 million venture fund just to purely go into things like sustainable ag, product B2C, product consumer brand, something that affects consumer experience. And they're investing in the future of their businesses. So it's a little bit different than what we'd see, let's say, in a venture fund that says, look, I'm looking for arbitrage. I might specialize in this tech sector, but even if I strayed a little bit outside, if there's arbitrage, we're looking for it. A lot of the corporates are saying, look, I specifically need it to fit within our business model somewhere, in some way, shape, or fashion. But one, can we make money on this investment, even if we didn't fully
Always
acquire
important.
it someday? Yeah,
Always
important. And they have tons of gunpowder and capital behind them to move things forward. And they say, look, if we have an LP, almost like an LP minority position, can we get hands-on and really control this company in the future? And can we bring it into our operations? I think major US corporates and major CEOs are going to be looking at this as a smart strategy. As people move supply chains away from China, and let's say it becomes more centralized, and say, look, are our global supply chains at risk? A lot of these guys in the US are going to say yes. How do we revert these supply chains? Sometimes it's not as easy as saying, I'm going to JV with this Mexican company, or I'm going to JV with this Canadian company. It takes capital movements to really get these guys in control and say, I need this product, but you have exclusive distribution arrangements with this guy. How do I get in there and get the supply? A lot of times capital can make it move a lot better than deal terms.
Yeah, and we've seen companies in our own experience go from zero to public. We've advised on IPOs and these kind of things. People who are starting a business and thinking from the end, or maybe they've been going for a while and thinking about the next round of capital, should be thinking about these kind of strategic investors. Market credibility comes with, if you're in the coffee industry like we are, an investment from Starbucks versus an investment from my uncle.
Yeah.
For example, no offense to my uncle.
Uncle Dave is great.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's great. But as people from an outsider's view start looking at the business, those names carry a lot of weight. They give a lot of validity to the business model. And also it's nice to know that you have a big name like that that's a potential customer, a potential acquirer, somebody that you can really partner with and build the business going forward.
Agreed. And I think for guys that are listening that are looking to raise capital, you should be thinking about that. We think about that, especially with the coffee company, as we begin to do a new capital round, or we begin to build the business out and the strategy in our minds. For instance, next month, we're going to go visit the global head of agronomy for Starbucks at their test farm in Costa Rica. Our management team got invited to go, so myself, Adam, and the president of our company, Boris, we're going to be going to visit them. We've been talking with Nespresso about forestation efforts in Colombia, right? You just got off a call talking about byproducts with the president of Super Cafe in Spain. I think it's very important for companies to think about, especially early stage companies that are emerging companies, to say, start reaching out to the bigger players in the market and start trying to do joint projects with them. I mean, it not just from a capital source, but more than ever, I think you're going to see these larger corporates come into play in the same battleground as the smaller companies. And they need you and you need them. And I think the ability to grow businesses via, let's say, whether JV or group projects, especially in the sustainability space, the ability is there and the opportunity is there. So I'd encourage all the listeners that are growing businesses, don't ever think that, if you're doing housing, KB Homes is suddenly out of your scope.
Right.
They never want to talk to you because you're so big and you're so small. I would disagree. A lot of those guys are looking for new emerging companies, founders that are doing original business theses, and said, hey, that's interesting. Maybe we can do like a joint project or a joint structure on something. And it can lead to more than just one deal. It can lead to capital, it can lead to the growth of the business, or it can obviously lead to 100% acquisition of your company someday.
Yeah. It's important, I think, to know what your value proposition is going into these conversations, understand what the needs of these companies are that you want to work with. back to coffee, and without getting into the weeds too much, the one thing we're exploring is all these coffee producers globally have tons of waste product from the coffee production process.
Yes.
What do you do with that waste product and in turn essentially garbage into a revenue source? The investment that we're making into that, the scientific exploration that we're doing around that, has a lot of value to other players in the industry who don't want to dedicate resources to that, don't want to invest in the R&D, are focused on other things. You have to understand where you can add value to the chain, and there's really, I think, no better way to prove yourself as an investable company other than providing value to these kind of participants.
I agree.
What do you think is a good way if people are saying, oh, man, this is overwhelming, how do I contact the right person that I need at 7-Eleven, or I want to do a JV with KB Homes or JetBlue? How does somebody even go about that?
Sure. I mean, one thing is all this information is publicly available.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, if we were researching to write this article, you know, the head, let's say the GPs on each one of these VC funds, we can get that information immediately. A lot of those funds say, hey, if you're doing something interesting in this space, send us a note here, right? That's one way. But also just competing in the market and letting the market know what you're doing. Like things like us, we want to be active in the market. We show market participants what we're doing, whether we're presenting at events, whether we're making videos like this, whether we're just reaching out through our internal contacts of, you know, we might have a contact at, you know, the head of agronomy at Starbucks, for instance, is a good contact of our head agronomist at the coffee company. You know, you might just want to chat with them about future research and development projects of the future of Arabica coffee strands and what we need to do in the future. So really, to me, it's more about just being in the market, make yourself visible, and don't be scared to reach out to someone just because you think they're not too big or they are too big and you're too small. Right. I think a lot of these guys, they want to reach out to you because you might be engaging in the research and development for the future of their business. You're spending your time and money, and they could eventually benefit from that in the future. They have the capital, right? And they need you. They want to talk.
Or maybe you're a couple steps down the road and you've already gotten a huge capital investment that they don't have to make again.
That's right.
So I think the takeaway is, I'd say, unabashedly telling the story, letting industry participants know what value you can provide. Yes. You know, we have, of our 250 some investors, lots of entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about raising money, how to go about it, thinking outside the box some in terms of what we're talking about here and who are potential investors like Pubcos that you might not have thought about before, and really making your wish list and targeting those guys directly, letting them know who you are and what value you can add.
I agree. And just one thing to finalize, I mean, just look at this as another tool in the toolkit, really. Why we were so interested about this topic is, you know, for instance, when we were learning about this, we didn't even know this really existed. We didn't realize how many public companies were taking minority positions in early stage companies. So for guys that do this every day, you know, that's gonna be very exciting for guys who don't do it every day. So just think of it as another tool alongside venture capital, alongside hedge fund public company investments, alongside LP syndicated deals with high net worths. You know, it's just one more aspect that you can use to help grow your business in the future.